So today I'm going to talk about lungs and why are we interested in lungs. So lungs are quite an interesting organ because in order to do their job they have to be constantly exposed to the outside world in order to take in air and give you the oxygen you need to live. So the lung isn't just a big bag of air, it's basically like a tree. So if you imagine the air coming in here through the mouth being like the main trunk of your tree, it branches out into loads of smaller and smaller airways until you get to the leaves at the very end. And these are sort of air sacs where exchange of gases from the air you breathe into your blood occurs. And these are called alveoli. So obviously when you're breathing in to get hold of this air and this oxygen that you need, you're not just breathing in the oxygen, you're exposed to the outside world at all of this surface area. So you're not just breathing in oxygen, you're getting hold of quite a lot of nasty stuff that's in the air, particularly if you're living in a city such as London. So for example, in one day you will breathe in 860,000 bacteria. So that's enough bacteria, if bacteria were the size of me and liked football, to fill 10 Wembley stadiums. So that all sounds a little bit scary, but not to worry because your lungs have got their own ready-to-go bodyguards sitting at the bottom. So these are called macrophages, and they basically sit at the bottom of the lung in the air sac, and they defend your lung from invaders. So macrophage literally means big eater, and that's what they do. They eat, so as things come into the lung, they sit relatively still, and they just eat away. They extend themselves around the invading bacteria, take it up inside them, and then they can just destroy it. So that keeps your lungs nice and safe. So has anybody played the childhood favorite game, Hungry Hungry Hippos? It's ages 3 and up, so it's perfectly okay for me to enjoy it as much as I do now, as much as I did when I was a kid. And basically that's what they're like. So if we say this red ball here is a bacteria, your macrophage sits and eats it up, no problem. So in a typical day, what can you imagine being on the menu for a macrophage? So this is everything that you're breathing in, what the macrophage has to deal with. Because the macrophage is basically the hungry hippo of the immune system. So it's eating all the time, and it's not a fussy eater. So first thing in the morning, you walk down a busy street. There's a lot of traffic, a lot of cars. You're potentially going to inhale a lot of pollution. So this is actually cigarette smoke, but it's all fairly similar. And these are very small particles, and they basically get right down into the bottom of your lungs, and they can get taken up by the macrophages. So if we have a little macrophage menu over here, start putting together its diet. So let's say lunchtime, you go into a Pret, and you're in a queue for a sandwich, and someone sneezes right in your face. So you're going to be hit by all sorts of nasties, including bacteria and viruses. Again, not to worry, macrophage is going to eat it right up. So that's on the macrophage's lunch. So you come home after your day, you go to bed, think you're nice and safe in bed, but your pillow could be a little bit dusty. It's going to be these guys, the house dust mites. And a vast majority of people with asthma actually have an allergic sensitization to these guys, and it's their feces, their poo, that actually causes allergy. So macrophages can eat that up as well. So with all that in mind, let's say this children's toy pond here is your lung, and these are the contents of a breath. And my glamorous assistant Lisa is going to help me demonstrate how a set of hungry macrophages might go about clearing your lungs from invaders. So we're going to need a timer, actually.
Ruth can count. Oh, there we are.
So you want to see, basically, how quickly the hungry macrophages can clear your lung of invaders. So if we just go now, see how quickly we can do it. We're going at full speed. Let's go.
Gone.
OK. I think it's safe to say I won there.
I think I won.
I think you might have won. OK, so that's great. That was, do we know how long that was? That was 10 seconds. So within one breath, they've cleared that up, and the lung is nice and clean and healthy. But what happens if a macrophage eats something that it shouldn't? So as I mentioned, the lung is not just going to be containing bacteria, you'll also potentially have pollution, cigarette smoke, and research has actually shown that if macrophages take up too many of these bad chemicals, it can actually stop them performing their function. So they might not be able to eat bacteria as well, or they might actually cause inflammation, which can lead to diseases such as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So let's have a look at these macrophages. So this one's done pretty well. It's eaten 2 bacteria. It's also eaten 2 of these pollution balls. So this macrophage, unfortunately, is injured, is now stretchered off and out of the game. This macrophage has done pretty well. That one's okay, as is this one. But let's say this one's had a bit too much as well. So do we think that the lung can now clear itself in 10 seconds if 2 of these macrophages can no longer perform properly? So if I can have Lisa up again, we're going to try in 10 seconds to clear the lung, but without these 2 macrophages. So I have to go this way. Okay.
Go.
So go. And that's 10 seconds. So as you can see, I think the take-home message from this is that in an unhealthy lung without functioning macrophages, there's going to be a risk of you inhaling these bacteria and then they're just hanging around and not being able to be cleared. So this is exactly what happens actually in COPD patients, is that if they're unable to actually clear infections from their lung, and they can be left with these long-lasting recurrent infections. So again, this all sounds a little bit scary, but this isn't a horror story, and actually macrophages have the ability to call on their friends. So when you lose a couple, they can actually recruit more from elsewhere in the lung and actually replenish themselves. So it's only in these chronic disease scenarios where it's a real massive problem. So I guess the take-home message would be to look after your lung health, look after your macrophages, and they'll look after you.